let's go. Okay, this time we should be live everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, you name it, we should be live. We should be good to go. Everybody, welcome back to the Crypto Power Hour. Sorry for the technical difficulties, starting a little bit late, but hopefully you're still tuning in. Basically, I just kind of want everyone to introduce themselves, kind of how we normally do. Everyone kind of go around. Go ahead, get started. Let me make sure everything's working on everything too.
Yeah, I'll start. What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Blackburn. I'm the original founder of Crypto Coin Trader, the community director for Aurochs, and I'm a crypto enthusiast. Glad to be here, everybody. Go ahead, Andrew.
All right, I'll take it next. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Gordon. I'm an attorney and CPA practicing mostly in crypto tax. Been in the space since 2014, so haven't seen everything, but I've seen just about everything related to crypto tax in the U.S., and I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
G'day, guys. My name is Brock. I've been trading cryptocurrency since 2016. I run an educational group, and most of the time I spend looking at charts.
Hey, I'm Daryl. I've been in the crypto space about 10 years, done everything from mining, trading, yield farming, also worked full-time in the tech industry, but really love crypto for the decentralization aspect.
All right, thank you guys. Sorry about that. I'm still making sure everything is working properly. I'm your host, Jacob. I'm the social media manager for Gordon Law Group. We have quite the show for you today. I want to get into it. I want to talk about SBF because, as everybody knows, he was arrested earlier this week. And as much as I want to have an expert on here of criminal defense, unfortunately, one of our friends, Carlo, DeFi defense lawyer, he couldn't make it, but I did do a previously recorded video with him, and basically I got him to break down everything. And so I guess we'll just watch that now. Afterwards, we can start our discussion about it. It's around like 10-ish minutes, but just so like everybody knows, this is a pre-recorded video. I did do it, and I'll kind of get into it with this one. Let me make sure that this plays correctly. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Crypto Power Hour. Kind of got an exclusive interview for you here. We want to know everything about SBF and what's going on here. I decided to bring on Carlo. I'm very excited for you to join us. Go ahead and give yourself a little introduction.
Yeah, so my name is Carlo D'Angelo. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I have an emphasis on crypto criminal crime. I go by the tag at DeFi Defense Law on Twitter, and my website is defidefenselawyer.com, and I'm delighted to be here with you.
Just as a full disclosure, none of anything that you are listening to is financial or legal advice. I have to say that. It's one of my favorite things I have to kind of put out there, but we'll kind of get right into it right here. I'll also throw up your Twitter. Sure. So if people want to go follow you on there, if they got any questions or anything, come straight to you. Give us a quick breakdown of pretty much the indictment of SBF, arrest, and everything pretty much that you can.
Sure. So it's been pretty widely reported that he was arrested in the Bahamas on an arrest warrant. That arrest warrant came out of the Southern District of New York. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the morning after his arrest in the Bahamas, unsealed the indictment. It's an 8-count indictment. The counts are basically all some form of wire fraud. There are some components of securities and commodities fraud worked into the indictment, as well as a money laundering count. And the most interesting count, this campaign fraud count. So basically, there are 4 general areas where they are looking to prosecute him. They're looking to prosecute him for fraud involving investors in FTX.com, fraud involving loans that were made through FTX.com and Alameda Research, another company that he is alleged to have controlled. The other component is lenders involved in Alameda Research and FTX.com. And then the final is that he made massive political contributions to both sides of the aisle, and the government believes that the monies used to make those political contributions were also somehow tied to the fraud.
Sure. And how serious are these charges?
Very serious. And I'm not saying anything that isn't a surprise to anyone. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York gave a press conference yesterday and described this as basically one of the biggest fraud cases in U.S. history. It's on a Madoff level.
What is the timeline going to look like for SBF and the seriousness of these sentencings?
So the timeline is a little bit up in the air right now because he's overseas in custody in the Bahamas. He appeared yesterday before the Bahamian court and made a request for bail pending extradition. He wanted a $250,000 bail. That way he could be released while he, I presume, wants to challenge extradition back to the United States on these charges. The court denied that request, and he's been held over with a new status hearing, I believe, on February 8th. Now the question is, what is he going to do? If he sits in a Bahamian jail, and if the conditions in that jail are not very good, being overseas in foreign custody can sometimes influence individuals to change their mind as far as opposing extradition. So let's say he agrees to extradition. He'll be flown probably back to New York, and then he'll make an initial appearance in front of a federal judge. He'll be formally advised of the charges against him. He'll plead not guilty to those charges, and then he'll have to take up the issue of whether the court will set a reasonable bond in his case. The government's going to probably ask for serious pretrial restrictions in this case because of the severity of the offense, the sentencing exposure he's facing, and the fact that he clearly has ties overseas to the Bahamas. So the next hotly contested thing will be release pending trial.
I kind of wanted you to also go over the sentencing guidelines. I saw your huge Twitter thread. There was a huge graphic that had a whole everything kind of chopped up. If you could explain that super quick as well.
Yeah, exactly. So in federal court, when it comes to white collar crime and when it comes to fraud cases, sentencing guidelines control what judges look to as the advisory starting point for where to sentence an individual. Federal judges are not bound by those guidelines, but they are advisory. When you're looking at a fraud guideline, one of the first considerations is the amount of loss. The allegations in this case, I've heard anywhere from $8 to $10 billion, could be more, could be less, who knows. But either of those numbers goes off the charts because the highest fraud guideline there is $500 million or more. So when you calculate those guidelines, it puts him at a level in the guideline chart that I had put in my Twitter post of a 37. That puts him in roughly the range of about a 20-year prison sentence. Where it gets very complicated for Sam Bankman is that, much like the Madoff case, if he is found guilty, if he pleads guilty or is convicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, each count carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. So you have the guidelines on one side, and then you have the statutory maximum penalty. If the guidelines are in excess of the maximum penalty, just like in the Madoff case, what can happen is, under the guidelines, the federal court has the discretion to consecutively sentence the defendant for each count. So if there's 20-year counts and they're all stacked up on each other, that gets you closer to what the guideline range looks like in a case like this. That's how Madoff got a 150-year sentence.
So what are we looking at for SBF here? Could this be a life in prison?
It's been reported that that is within the realm of possibility. It will depend on the loss calculations. It will depend on the number of counts that he either pleads guilty to or is convicted of. And it will depend on the discretion of the sentencing judge. What was obviously devastating in the Madoff case was the testimony of victims of the fraud who came forward and said that their financial situation was pretty much devastated by the fraud in this case. If you have that sort of similar victim impact testimony in a case like this, it could persuade a federal judge to sentence him consecutively to multiple counts. And in theory, that could run up to a sentence that could amount to the rest of his life. Worst case scenario.
Now, are the SEC charges and the CFTC charges also going to be a major player in that as well if a judge looks at it?
So what happened in this case is interesting, and it looks like, based on the press conference that I saw, that this was a joint effort by the SEC, the CFTC, which controls commodities trading, and the Department of Justice. The SEC and the CFTC dropped civil complaints on Bankman. They were pretty much revealed simultaneous with the unsealing of the indictment, which suggests that this was a unified front. Now, the SEC and the CFTC can make a referral for criminal investigation, but I think what's going to happen is he's going to be fighting a battle in civil court with respect to the SEC and the CFTC lawsuit, while at the same time defending this 8-count criminal indictment. So he'll be fighting a war on two fronts, it sounds like.
And we know there's multiple people involved in anything, but SBF is pretty much the first one to get nailed, like with all these charges. Is it possible for other people to start getting charged? Anybody else to kind of start popping?
I think it's beyond possible because in listening to the press conference yesterday, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York made it very clear that although this was a very swift investigation and prosecution, that there is more to come. And he, in fact, publicly urged people that if they have any involvement in this case, it would be advisable for them to come forward before the DOJ comes looking for them. And remember, the indictment talks about co-conspirators. So there are other individuals involved. They might be individuals who cooperated, meaning they are unindicted co-conspirators, or they may be individuals who are not yet known to the grand jury. But under any scenario, I could easily foresee more defendants coming into the fold in this case.
And pretty much prior to all of this, SBF was like on Twitter Spaces. He was doing interviews like on Good Morning America. You know, like I said earlier, not
Right.
legal or financial advice, but from a lawyer's perspective, was it smart to do any of these interviews?
You know, I host a Twitter space called LexLine, where we get together 4 days a week and we talk about new and emerging events in Web3 law. And we have collectively been talking about these public Twitter spaces and these Twitter comments that he's been making. And I can't see many lawyers out there thinking that this is a good idea because he's just potentially further incriminating himself. And a smart prosecutor is going to take those recordings and is going to take those tweets and either blow them up on a big screen in front of a jury, because there are a lot of admissions of fault there, and they could also have a serious impact during the sentencing hearing. I just can't see a lot of good coming from making those public-facing statements, and I think it could prove to be detrimental for him. In white-collar cases like this, the typical defense may be that, well, he's young, he didn't understand, he got over his skis, it's a startup, he was trying and he failed, but very clear policies with respect to how investor funds would be treated. And the allegations in this case seem to run contrary to the very public-facing policy as far as investor funds. And to say that that was simply an error in judgment may not go over well with a jury.
Carlo, I want to thank you for taking the time. I think you've answered everything that I wanted you to super quickly, and I think everything is very in-depth. If anybody has any other questions, like I said, I will link below Carlo's Twitter handle. Go ask him. I will also probably link his great thread that he did breaking all of this stuff down. It's got graphics. It's super, super great. Follow him as well and tune into LexLine. Keep up to date with everything as it's going down with, updates. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoyed this little interview.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
All right, I'm throwing everybody back in the mix here.
Great job on that, Jake.
Thank you.
That was awesome, Jacob.
Good summary.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone got a pretty good listen to that. It came through perfectly, I hope. I kind of want to start with Andrew, lawyer to lawyer. Is there anything you strongly disagree with? Anything that I would assume you pretty much agree with everything?
Yeah, no, I think he did an excellent job of breaking down the different steps that are involved of this prosecution. People often think that it's going to be some sort of fast process, but even step one is going to be bringing SBF to the United States. Many of you might recall that I was counsel for the late John McAfee, and John went through a similar process in Spain, where he was arrested in Spain, and then the U.S. requested his extradition. John stayed in prison in Spain for about 8-9 months before the court finally ordered that he be extradited to the United States. The situation perhaps is a bit different. From what I've heard, the facilities in the Bahamas that he's currently being held in are very poor. And so it may make sense for him to want to get out of there and into a U.S. prison as soon as possible, especially because extradition is almost guaranteed. I don't see any situation where the Bahamian courts are going to say, yes, he can stay here. We're not going to send him to the U.S. So it's pretty much guaranteed. And it's then a timing question. And so in John's case, there were several reasons why he wanted to stay in Spain. But for SBF, there doesn't seem to be a lot of reasons why he'd want to stay in the Bahamas. So I would expect that the extradition process is going to move quite quickly, and he'll be in a U.S. court soon. And then the next fight, as Carlo had described, is going to be about whether or not he's released until the trial occurs. But I think overall he did an excellent job, and I learned quite a bit myself. So thank you for bringing him here.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really good comparison with John McAfee. I kind of want to toss it to Brock a little bit. I want to know how you're personally feeling. How were you feeling when you saw that he finally got arrested?
Man, it's good to see justice in the crypto space, you know. Look, honestly, I think this sort of thing is something that's necessary and it needs to happen because, I mean, I know, Joe, you've been around, you've probably seen a lot of this shit happen in the past, and to have something meant, you know, I've had friends that have lost 90% of their net worth because of this. You know, I've had a lot of people around me that have really, really been hurt from this happening and life ruining. You know, there's people talking suicide and all kinds of things. Same as when Celsius went down, when the whole fiasco happened with Luna. And I think, you know, while I'm not a fan of regulations and things like that, I think it is something necessary to stop this sort of thing happening. You know, obviously it'll be good to see justice served, but yeah, the effect on the market and sort of the fallout that's going to follow, I don't think we've seen in its entirety because, you know, he had his hands in so many different pies, so many different investments. You know, that money that they've overcapitalized with, over leveraged with, has been invested in so many different places. And yeah, I don't think we've seen the end of the fallout from this at all, to be honest.
Now, you're in Australia, correct, Brock?
Yeah.
I know in the United States, we've already seen like a push for better regulation with crypto and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing that same push in Australia?
Look, man, to be honest, Australia sort of just lets the rest of the world lead the way with a lot of legislation. I know we've got ASIC here, which, you know, to have an exchange, they had to have like a separate subsidiary arm of FTX for Australians, and there was hope that people would get their money back. But I think we're going to see a very similar sort of Chapter 11 bankruptcy where, you know, the people's best case scenario is a class action where they might have to wait 3 years to get 20% of their money back. I don't think that, it's interesting, man. It's interesting to see, I guess, like the comparison with the rest of the world where, as I said, legislation here, it's a little bit behind. People are only sort of just getting caught up on tax and stuff now when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Sure, Joe, how are you feeling about it?
You know, I watched that interview. First off, as I said at the beginning, great job on that, Jacob. You asked some really great questions, and I was super impressed by him. He had some really insightful descriptions and explanations for the situation that I really was not aware of. And to be even more honest, I didn't even think that the government was even taking it as serious as it sounds like it is. So it's actually, you know, really refreshing as somebody who's a social media person. And Jake, I know you can relate to this. You know, I deal with, you know, the people around, like, I mean, like the opinions, the frustrations, the excitements, and, you know, the FTX disaster, it's just shameful for crypto. However, and as Brock alluded to, the worst may not have been, you know, may not have come yet. However, I think that this is really, really bullish for centralized finance within the crypto space. It's really necessary that there's some accountability for the next wave of users. It's the evolution of crypto in general. Like, you look at any technology. I mean, look where computers were in the 1970s. You know, blockchain's 10 years old publicly, or excuse me, 12, 13 years old publicly. And, Daryl's seen, the last 10 years of it. I think we can all agree that it's really come a long ways from what it was. But what is it going to look like in 10 years? Well, these things have to happen first. The dominoes have to fall to enable the bigger picture to kind of start taking fold for bigger companies like Apple and Microsoft to start taking this more seriously. They gotta protect their users, and this is the first step in that. So, cheers to the Bahamian government for actually coming through and not playing games, I guess, with the United States. But more importantly, I think that we'll be seeing a lot more to come with the SBF.
And I'm not sure if you've all seen, but there's a thread circulating on social media about how there's one subsidiary of FTX that perhaps all their customers are going to get all of their funds returned, and that's FTX Japan. I'm not sure if you've all seen this.
I did see that.
Okay.
And the story goes that Japan has been through this before. First with Mt. Gox in 2014-ish, if I have that right. Then there was subsequently another large exchange hack. Can't recall the name. After that, Japan implemented a series of regulations towards centralized exchanges, requiring, for instance, that they hold reserves 1-to-1. Those reserves are held by a different independent group, basically like a bank, and that they don't have access to them. So that would stop SBF or anyone else from any funny business. And so at least the story goes that it sounds like FTX Japan is going to be able to provide funds back. But perhaps the United States will take a lot of those same lessons and even some of the same structure and use that to create a system of regulations in the United States. And I think that this is going to be a good thing. Exchanges shouldn't be able to take customer funds and invest them or leverage them and do all sorts of things. That shouldn't be the way it is. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes events like this to implement these changes.
Sure, I'm going to pass it to Daryl so he can get his thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting from his high-level take on how things are going. It didn't sound like he was so certain that SBF could be facing life in prison. It was like maybe up to life in prison, but given the suits and, obviously things are still unfolding, but the civil suits and the criminal indictments, it could be up to a life in prison, going with the maximum structure. But it's not like, it didn't seem so sure that it's like Bernie Madoff, 150-year type level yet. Now, obviously, like a lot of things can still unfold throughout the next couple weeks through discovery and everything. And I hope, for all the damage he's caused, we never see him, I wouldn't say we want to see him locked up forever. Like, obviously, everyone has their personal opinion, but we never want to see him like able to be in crypto anymore. Whatever regulations or restrictions they can put on him to where, he can't hold a business and be handling customer funds, do any financial type related businesses. I hope they, implement that and we never, see him getting anywhere close to crypto anytime in the rest of his life. But yeah, from the holding too, I've also heard that, the Bahamian government or in the Bahamas, they can hold him like up to February, right? We have until February to indict him, but there isn't a lot of talk on what's going to happen after February. Like if we don't extradite him in by the time February comes around, could he get released in February, like on house arrest? But
I also noticed that you talked about a little bit. You don't want him in crypto anymore. I don't know if you caught any of the spaces that he did, like a couple of days before, but he was very like he would never say yes or no to anything whenever somebody would ask him a question, and he was very enthusiastic because he was like playing like League of Legends while doing you could hear him like smacking the keyboard, and people were like, he's like, I'm playing League of Legends. He was very like adamant, like, oh, all I need is 8 billion. This is how I have to get the money back. This is how this is my redemption. I'm sure it's a no, but do you see any way of him redeeming his image?
Yeah, I mean, there was also a story that came out that back in college, he created funny money called Bankman Bucks. You know, he printed his face on these $100 bills in college, and yeah, it was just a funny skit. But you know, it's kind of the way the world comes around, and here he is creating an FTT token. You know, this funny money and doing it on a global scale when you know there was signs early on that maybe he wasn't quite the best business person early on.
Sure. Anybody else think that he actually can bring his reputation back? Because I'm very
The
slow.
dude's toast, not a chance.
I think you'll be lucky to survive, to be honest.
Yeah, agreed.
And you know, outside of that, he's probably had access to a lot of information that a lot of people haven't. Talking Weinstein sort of stuff, you know. There's things that he'd have privy to that a lot of people, and you know, there's when you're on a sinking ship, it's pretty easy to drag everyone else down with you. So you know, we might even see a lot of things enter the crypto space that otherwise wouldn't have come to light as a result of this.
Well said.
You know, even to save himself. And I think his only attempt at redemption would be to sort of try and clear out some of that trash. And even though it's a scumbag thing to do, I don't think it's above him, given what we've seen.
You know, it's crazy to see Kevin O'Leary still just not wanting to, throw Sam under the bus and still pointing fingers in front of Congress saying, Binance is a big part of the blame because of all this, instead of saying, yeah, SBF fucked up and he was using customer funds. Like, you still don't see Kevin throwing Sam under the bus. And it's crazy to see that, even still to this day.
Well, it might be even just out of his own interest and self-preservation that he's been so associated with FTX that he needs to continue that narrative that it wasn't FTX's fault, because he's one of the allegedly one of the best investors out there, right? And would do such due diligence, and he would never make a bad investment decision like this. So I think it just plays to the narrative. He's got to continue to deflect and blame other people.
Now, one of the things I saw on the interview was talking about the other people who would be involved in the case, and you bring up Kevin O'Leary, but also the Caroline, I can't remember her last name, the CEO of Alameda. Like this person was completely unqualified for the position, and she didn't put herself in that position. It looks like SBF put her there, and to some degree, the next hired her. And I know there was a very weird dynamic of relationships within that household and that really big, huge mansion that they lived in. But I don't want to speculate. I've just heard rumors. I'm sure they're relatively true. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. But with that being said, I mean, is she less liable because she's completely unqualified? Like, how much of this is going to fall on her too? Because she's a big part in this too.
Man, I was actually reading something. So her dad was a professor in economics at MIT. From my understanding, and he's actually good friends with SEC chairman Gary Gensler. Sorry if I butchered that name. So, you think that being so closely related with someone who does understand economics and does sort of have that sort of seat in the SEC, I guess, like accessible to her dad, that she'd at least have a better understanding of what she was getting herself into, and we're talking billions of dollars. So at the very least, you're going to capture the interest of family and friends and people who know what's happening. So, outside of, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, is it a plan from the SEC to sort of engage in these regulations? Because ultimately where I see this headed is, getting people excited and enthused and educated on cryptocurrency so that we can end up with a centralized digital currency with programmable money and sort of ultimate control through that means.
Sorry, everybody's still here. I've got
We're all just in awe and processing.
Oh my gosh. We talked a little bit about, you mentioned Kevin O'Leary, and I've been watching those clips, but they also have the new CEO of FTX. Again, the guy's name escapes me at the moment, but it's the same guy who helped out Enron. And he mentioned, he was like, yeah, FTX used QuickBooks to do their accounting. This is a great question for Andrew. Is that smart for a multi-billion-dollar company?
And I think he even said in Congress, there's nothing wrong with QuickBooks. Don't get me wrong. Most of our clients use QuickBooks, but our clients aren't multi-billion-dollar companies with intricate webs of subsidiaries. So usually when you get to that scale, you have different software, usually not software that you could go to Best Buy and buy off the shelf. And it wasn't just QuickBooks, but they even talked about how expense reimbursements were done through Slack. So there's just a lack of internal controls and just the standard practices that you'd see of a business, even a fraction of their size. So it's nothing on its face wrong with QuickBooks, but it has limitations. And I think that is even going to come out over time as the forensic accounting takes place. That perhaps will take longer than it typically would because there's just a lack of adequate records or trying to use QuickBooks for something that it really wasn't made to do.
Can I just ask, Andrew, in your opinion, do you think this was more of a result of just complete negligence, or was it more intentional than that?
That's going to be the big $1 million multi-year question, which was he just inexperienced, didn't know how to run a business of the size, got out of his hands, and he didn't have the right advisors around him? Or is it the alternative, which was, if you want to hide billions of dollars being used improperly, you have poor controls, you use things like QuickBooks, and you do those types of things. So I think that's going to be the big question. My personal reaction is that at some size, you need to have ordinary business prudence. And even if you don't have those expertise and the knowledge, you hire people around you to put these things in place. So, and if you're choosing not to do that, then I think in some situations that even goes beyond negligence.
Yeah, Brock, what you asked there was something that I was thinking myself, and I almost feel like this is such a great, not great as in like it's a exaggerated example of what crypto looks like in general to a lot of people from the outside looking in, and that is a bunch of younger, inexperienced people who made a lot of money without really having to work for it or knowing how to manage it. And I mean, I look back, I'm 37 now. Looking back, if I was around 30 years old or even younger than that in some cases for some of these companies, and this isn't just specific to SBF, but a lot of people don't have the maturity or the literal like process in which you manage businesses. And I'm still learning on a day-to-day basis. Now, I look at SBF and I don't feel bad for him whatsoever. This dude got himself in a situation where he had enough money where he could have done things the right way and been lazy for the rest of his life. Instead, he maintained a laziness within the practice of his business, and therefore it ended up destroying not just this business, but a lot of people's financial lives. And I don't want to ramble here, but one of the biggest points I want to make here in regards to the statement about the inexperience of crypto, it's still maturing and evolving, as I said before. But more importantly, it's got to take this step past this immediately. Like, people have to recognize, hey, look at these young kids. I'm not gonna participate in this crypto concept because this is a ridiculous, concept. It's not going to work. People don't have experience. Look at their LinkedIn. People need to start holding them accountable by not participating with these scams or these maybe well-intended projects, but completely pointless. And I've been guilty of it. I see something, I see opportunity. But anyways, the big picture here, we've got to move past this as a crypto community and start being way more mature in our own purchases.
Yeah, it's like some of the statements that the Congress members were making were completely ridiculous. And even they had one of the actors from like the OC talking about how crypto is such a Ponzi. It's like, this is the least qualified person to be talking about any fintech related technology. Yeah, and it's, he was talking about how he toured the biggest crypto mining farm in Texas and how much energy it was, burning, not all of the good that it's done about pushing for renewable resources within Texas. And, he took the very surface level, he's completely against crypto, but he has no notoriety in the space. So it's like just someone random they brought up to talk negatively about crypto. But I do think now that, charges have been filed, we're going to start to see a lot more dirt come up from Telegram and Discord messages. You heard the other day about him writing down billions of dollars in losses that was tagged as like our Korean friend or our Asian friend on QuickBooks monthly accounting, and people starting to ask like, what are all these things? And there's just no paper trail, so it's like trying to decipher what his code words were and what his web of lies actually meant. But you're going to see a lot more come out in all these Discord and Telegram messages he was sending to people. He wasn't smart in using like encrypted channels, or again, he was just lazy and doing everything just in broad daylight.
Yeah, fair warning to anybody who was messaging SBF. Their chats are probably going to go public. And I know we just did a video, Andrew, if anybody didn't file their crypto taxes with all of these bankruptcy proceedings, your information could also be public and prime target for that IRS audit. Correct, Andrew?
Yes, exactly. It's a topic that people often don't think about, which is that FTX and FTX US and all the different subsidiaries going through bankruptcy, their creditors are that their information in many cases will become public. And that information can be used not only just by the public at large, but by the IRS to target audits. So for years, we've heard from people falsely so that, hey, I only trade on foreign exchanges. There's no way the IRS is going to get this data or know to come after me. Well, here we've got a prime example of FTX, which I can't guarantee it, but I would say in all likelihood, that information is going to be in the hands of the IRS.
And it's also going to be in the hands of scammers and people that are going to start targeting the vulnerable people. You're going to start, maybe 6 months, a year, once this information becomes public, hearing about people getting contacted by an agency to give out their information, say, they lost all this information, or all this money, they just need the information. And then people are going to start getting identity hacks, thinking they're, becoming part of a class action lawsuit, but in reality, they're just becoming part of identity theft.
Absolutely. You just opened up a whole new door there, Daryl. I didn't even think about that. To your point, Andrew, let me ask you this then. So, and I know a lot of people who have that same sentiment, as far as, if it's centralized, but it's offshore, or somewhere not in the US base, they think they can get away by just moving around on different addresses and different wallets. But it all typically comes down to one entry and exit point for as Americans go. With that being said, I mean, you look at FTX, it's I guess it's what, 3 years old or so, really started getting popular towards, I guess, like 2021, I think last year. Would you say that like with the IRS, coming in to have this potential information now at their disposal, they will be actively doing that intentionally? Is that something they're going to be doing to as like a tool, like, okay, we can really get a bunch of people now? I mean, what is your sentiment on that?
Yes, my sentiment is yes. There's a very large tax gap. And Congress often talks about this. And the tax gap is the difference between what people actually pay and what they should pay if all of their crypto or other tax items were accounted for. Sure. And it's massive and would substantially impact the national debt. And so how do you reduce that? Education is part of it, but enforcement is the large other part. And so the budget of the IRS has increased substantially towards enforcement in the coming years, additional audits, making sure they're collecting and reducing the tax gap. It's also become widely known that perhaps the number one target of the IRS in the next couple of years is crypto. Much of the tax gap relates to crypto. And so as the IRS gets more of this information, I think it would be foolish to assume that they're not going to use this for exactly what their mandate over the next couple of years is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to add on to that, it's a good year to get your stuff in order, folks, because crypto's gone down, right? I mean, I think that, and I'm not a tax attorney as like Andrew is, or any tax advisor whatsoever, but pay your taxes and do the right thing, because this is a good year for more than likely for people to be able to really get their stuff in order, because it's probably a loss. And then don't mess up. I mean, if you're Andrew, is it true that, if you're showing the intent to do well, they take that into consideration, even if you screwed it up?
Well, we talked about the SBF situation, which is that, on a massive scale, right?
Yeah, sure.
It was the intent to do well, or, was it otherwise? And really the same thing applies here. If you're a crypto trader, you have significant trading, even if it's not gains, you should still take the right steps, hire professionals where appropriate, report properly. And And so, yeah, it's really essential nowadays because of all of these reasons to report. And you brought up a great point, Joe, which is in 2022, we're unfortunately generally in a down market, but that is typically all the more reason to report. Collect those losses now so that you can use them in future years when the market goes up.
Absolutely.
Make sure that you take those. So perhaps even to the benefit of those out there.
So-
I've actually got to run.
Sorry.
I've got a hard stop, but yeah, go ahead, Joe. We're going to say something?
No,
I was
go
going
on.
to jump in there, Andrew, quickly if I could. So in the States, if you're say running at a loss now, and you're in a crypto that you thought might do well in the future, are you better off to sell them at a loss and essentially rebuy that crypto so that you can offset them losses for future years? Does it work like that in the States?
So despite what TikTok will tell you, that is not always beneficial. Most situations, yes. And in the US, the law, at least currently, is quite unique where you can sell, realize that loss, buy it back, and still have that loss. One of the things that you're doing, which TikTok doesn't tell you, is you're resetting your holding period. You now need to wait an additional year to sell for long-term gains. One of the best tax strategies overall is try to have long-term gains. So if you know it's going to be at least a year, even down the line now, then perhaps still makes sense. But it doesn't all have benefits. There are some things to think about as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, but I've got to run. But thank you all, and thanks, Jacob, for putting this together.
No problem, Andrew.
thanks for
I'm going to keep going.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Cool. For more tax information, I did put our Twitter, and it's Gordon Law Ltd. You guys were mentioning, and I know Brock mentioned Gary Gensler, the SEC chairman, because I've been doing all of these reports. I've been doing all these videos, been putting out all these blog posts about how the SEC has been coming after all of these different, crypto companies. And even right now, they're still in a battle, with Ripple. But FTX, nothing came up. Nothing was on their radar. There were no flags for them. Nothing. And I know that the congressional hearing, they wanted to hear from Gary, but he was pretty much like, "No, I'm not going to come on."
And look, man, this it opens up a can of worms, and I know a lot of people are into crypto because they don't trust the government, and I'm absolutely one of them people. This is, it's obviously you're spitballing here, but there's a potential that this was a plan, and there was that, they've specifically used someone who was negligent, elevated them through a platform so that they could usher in regulations and essentially push the market where they want it to go. My main concern with crypto right now is that this whole Bitcoin and everything is essentially just a Trojan horse used for them to bring in a centralized digital currency, as I said, programmable money. They're already doing it in China where your money will expire. They're allocating people money based on carbon footprints. There's all kinds of things that they can do with that, and it's essentially it all comes down to control. And as I said, with that sort of relation between I can't remember her name, Caroline, and as that SEC chairman, things like that, it starts begging the question of how deep does this sort of thing go? So yeah, as I said, my biggest concern right now is that are they going to use this to stop crypto from being decentralized?
Yeah. Well, you can't stop DeFi, but you can definitely put a fence around everything. And I agree, though, that there is there's potentially some tin hat, tinfoil theories
that's the realm.
But I mean, I tend to go there myself, and at least just to be creative and keep an open mind, you got to think that that even if it was if it is a Trojan horse or to some degree, to see who is going to be impacted. Like, is SBF part of the bigger cartel? I don't think he is. However, I know he's connected to that, but we're going to see how deep the state actually goes and helping their friends out, because what happens to Caroline, to me, is a very, very telling story to what may or may not be the truth here.
Absolutely.
Even conspiracy theories aside, with FTX only being a few years old, it kind of goes back to best effort. They were filing their returns for the past couple of years, But just imagine the IRS or the SEC trying to uncover or unravel that web of, all these different shell corps and, where all this money was going. When you look at how long Bernie Madoff was running his scam versus FTX only running the scam for a couple of years, the SEC, CFTC, and IRS have actually moved a lot quicker than, the previous big scam, Bernie Madoff. Whether or not, it's related to, the fall of FTX and then filing bankruptcy, or if they were already looking at it, I think we'll get more information in the coming year. But I can only imagine the team of people it would take and how many hours to unravel half the stuff that we even know about, let alone what they were actually filing the past couple of years.
Absolutely. And I mean, like Joe said, I think for crypto to go into, into mainstream adoption, for people to be more trusted with it, to stop this sort of shit from happening, this is necessary. We've had things in the past. As I said, we had Mt. Gox, and we've had these things happen in the past, and all it does is the market ends up coming back stronger and obviously has a better foundation behind it. I think it's important that people start using sort of due diligence. And I'm curious to see in the next bull run if we do see things that have absolutely no substance rally 10,000% overnight. If we do get that same sort of euphoria where people are just throwing money at garbage and seeing things run, because as we've seen that nothing is too big to fall in crypto now. Major exchanges, huge projects with billions and billions of dollars in them, and people getting hurt. So, maybe people will at least use this to become more educated and a little bit more careful with their money.
Well said. And don't ever forget, not your keys, not your crypto. I mean, like the future of crypto and the purpose of crypto has always been decentralized finance, and Bitcoin was created in that that bigger understanding of control your own destiny in some degree. We're still babies in the space of finance as far as blockchain and crypto go, and I'm really, really bullish long term. Of course, not financial advice, as Jake said in the recording, but I look at what Bitcoin can be next with the regulation, and I feel very confident knowing that there's a decentralized finance DeFi concept that I can rely on for my own personal well-being, but at the same time allowing the biggest audience in crypto is the one that hasn't entered, right? And like a week after SBF was arrested, or excuse me, it was the FTX crashed and it was exposed as a massive fraud and failure. Essentially, Fidelity comes out and says that they're going to be offering Bitcoin services. So like this to me shows that the bigger players are watching closely. And just like after 2017, 2018, 2019 allowed a lot of infrastructure to be built during these winter markets. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention www.getorox.com. Go download the wallet of the future, folks. I mean, this is how you take control of yourself. And of course, I work for the company, full disclosure, and I'm very proud of it. Daryl's also a big Orox guy, and we're proud of our of what our community is and what Orox team has built. But it does not take away from the point that if you don't control your crypto, it's not yours. It's theirs, and you can lose it.
I actually got my invite for the Fidelity crypto arm this morning. I'll be, obviously have corporate accounts with 401ks and everything, but just being able to poke the bear and see, what Fidelity has to offer. I know they say 0 trading fees and everything, but I've had accounts with FTX, never had money on it, even on the institutional side. But I always like to, get accounts, see what they're actually doing, and see if it's legit. Yep. I know you won't be able to, send crypto in and out of Fidelity, but just giving this opportunity to people on these fixed level incomes and converting their 401ks and retirement accounts is huge, even if they never actually hold their Bitcoin.
Yeah, the exposure is great.
And and if nothing else, like the fact that we're seeing these massive frameworks being developed, you've got all these huge companies now that are in charge of the economy. Things like PayPal, Microsoft, Google. Investing in cryptocurrency gives a lot of hope and alludes to the future of cryptocurrency. And I remember personally, like in 2018, this is why I stopped trading around news. Like we had some of the most bullish news we've ever had in 2018 as Bitcoin sort of plummeted down to like 3K. We hit mainstream adoption in a bear market. Like people talk about mainstream adoption. We got institutional investors as soon as them EFTs came out, like that. So what happened? The whole catalyst for the 2017 sort of bear market was there wasn't a lot of places for people to be able to short Bitcoin. So they brought in these a means for institutions to be able to short Bitcoin. So of course they're going to do that after a tremendous run, with nothing on the other side of it. What followed that was the entire retail market becoming bearish. It's okay, it's a scam, it's dead. As we've heard 1,000 times, China's banned Bitcoin, and simultaneously Microsoft is rolling out framework to use Bitcoin. You can pay for services now with Microsoft with Bitcoin, and seeing more and more framework being rolled out. Like people talk about mainstream adoption. We have hit mainstream adoption, right? Mainstream adoption is when these major corporations where people are spending their money are giving you the capacity to utilize Bitcoin, right? And that's happened. Now you can use Bitcoin to pay for a lot of things now. It's not just Satoshi's living room where you can find a third party to pay for your bills anymore. Like there is a lot of ways to spend your cryptocurrency. There's McDonald's in Switzerland that is taking Bitcoin, Thailand, all around the world, all this stuff's happening. And, they use these bear markets to bring to make all these things happen under the blanket so that, because look, it's the way markets work, right, is with like any kind of market, right? They need the psychology behind it more so than timing, more so than anything. They need retail to be in despair because the people, who run the market, are in charge of the economy, they accumulate at the lows when everyone else is bearish, right? Because they're accumulating at the cheapest price possible. So they need to drive down that sentiment. They don't want to release bullish news when the market's already running up because it means they have to pay more for their crypto.
True.
And so the best thing they can do now is drive down that sentiment as hard as they can. And I won't be surprised if we get this domino effect of just more negative news, one after the other, until people are back into that point of despair. People now, even now, the market's 50-50. Half people are bullish, half people are bearish. And anytime I've seen the market turn, I'll put out a post or something and say, oh, might turn it. And it's this barrage of you're an idiot. And I don't think we've gotten there yet. People are still too confident in the market. And, as I said, I don't know if it's going to be the FTX fallout that follows or anything like that. But if nothing else, man, look at the framework globally. We've got governments utilizing cryptocurrency now. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent in research from government agencies who otherwise, didn't take crypto seriously until the past couple of years. Massive corporations. The writing's on the wall. I really don't think it's a tough decision to make. I think, not financial advice, but as a retail trader, patience is going to serve you above all else. That's going to be the best way to approach the market.
I was going to say, regardless of whether you think it's mainstream or not, if you go up to somebody, especially in the United States, if you say the word Bitcoin, they know what Bitcoin is. Do they know it's blockchain technology? Of course not. But I also agree with companies kind of getting in on the sneak a little bit. Starbucks just launched they're integrating NFTs with their rewards program.
Yeah, the people that actually built that for Starbucks too launched their own company.
Yeah, whenever you get your own coffee or anything, you're gonna get some sort of non-fungible token. But they're again not any financial.
That's interesting. I didn't know that was the case. That's awesome.
Yeah, subconsciously people aren't gonna know that's like blockchain technology.
Yeah.
They're never.
Yeah. And that's when mass adoption is truly here, is when you don't realize you're using it.
Yeah. Even Twitter, man. Elon Musk, right? This is my not financial advice. My next favorite investment I'm looking at for the bull run, right? Elon Musk he's got his text messages subpoenaed by the courts, messaging Joe Rogan saying, okay, we're going to use Dogecoin, integrate it with Twitter so that people can't use bots because you're going to have to pay a small fee in Dogecoin. Right, so now you automatically have 350 million mandatory shareholders inside of the Twitter space who are going to have to hold on to Dogecoin and interact with Dogecoin as a cryptocurrency, whether they like it or not. It's a massive, massive social media platform. On top of that, they're integrating NFTs, all of this. So, it's here, man. You talk about mainstream adoption. You don't get much more mainstream than Starbucks and Twitter, right? Than the richest guy in the world pumping a meme coin. That's what, sometimes things happen so slowly that you don't realize that they're here yet. And as I said, 2018 was from, in my personal perspective, is when we hit mainstream adoption. you don't have your grandma and granddad saying, "Hey, should we buy some Bitcoin?" Like if it hasn't hit mainstream adoption, man. Like my dad can't send a text message and he's asking me about Bitcoin. Like, you know.
All right, everyone. I don't want to bring it down here, but I think we're gonna have to do a hard stop.
No worries.
I do have a few other things I have to do after this, but you guys, this was a pretty good one. I really enjoyed this. I appreciate you guys taking your time out of the day to be here. Oh, wait.
My pleasure, man. And great job on
Yeah.
that first interview.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. If you guys have anything else you want to say, anything else you want to plug?
No, that was it's good as always, Jacob. Nice having a chat with you, Joe, and you too,
Always.
Daryl. I really appreciate your input as always, guys.
I want to congratulate the Aurochs team one more time. I wanted to do it at the beginning, but technical difficulties. They did launch their wallet, and they were trending on Twitter, so it was really exciting to see when I was doing my stuff and I saw it right there. I was like, "Oh my gosh,
that's pretty cool." Yeah, thank
Not
you.
your keys, not your
Jake.
crypto.
Yeah, congratulations to the entire Aurochs team. I
Yes,
know
absolutely.
Georgie and Cassie aren't here either, but if they see this, that'd be great.
Well, just quickly, I don't work with Aurochs, and I've been through their products. It is a great product, so that is completely unbiased opinion. And I know you guys might. Yeah.
I like it, Brock. I like that
Yeah,
opinion.
no.
Good job.
All right, you guys.
Thanks.
I think we've been doing these like once a month, and I think we're going to continue doing them once a month. But if anybody has any questions or anything, please comment them below. If anybody wants to reach out to anybody in the panel, also leave a comment. We can put our ads. We can put any way that we can find us. This has been the Crypto Power Hour. I appreciate everyone being here. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys.